others. Could these fires have grown so large if infrastructure were in place to contact first responders earlier? Why should citizens have to drive from Payson to State Route 188 only to find the road is closed and have to turn around the 17 miles and go back to Payson? While the ADOT 511 app is good, it is not the only answer. SRP has dark fiber to Roosevelt Dam. Sparklight is now dark fiber between Shiloh and Payson. APS is working on extending fiber to Payson. So there's multiple opportunities to be leveraged here in order to start having communications along this roadway. ADOT has long wanted to have overhead signs, cameras, and other capabilities in this area. Where is that included in this plan? It's not. Going through the whole plan, there's nothing that discusses this. Most towns and cities have adopted a dig once methodology, so when a roadway is constructed or maintained, the various service providers can place their infrastructure for current and future needs. Where is the public-private partnership to enable federal and state rural broadband initiatives? It's not found in this plan in any part. Another missed opportunity was with the Loop 202 South Mountain Freeway. While the project was successful because the while the project was successful, it was not complete because it didn't factor in the communications infrastructure, which has led to cellular traffic not being available in sections of the Loop 202 going around South Mountain. And more importantly, the 800 megahertz radios used by first responders is not working in this area. Where it be police officers, fire department, or others, their radios stop working as they go around that bend. It wasn't factored into the original Loop 202 plans. This is a public safety problem even today for both citizens and first responders, which MAG was notified shortly after the Loop 202 South Mountain Freeway was opened. ADOT also needs to factor in expanding 5G and broadband. So there's many opportunities for this to be included in your current plan and future one. Thank you. I think that's 3 minutes on the nose.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Floyd?
So I'll go back. The only other request you had received was Mr. Kenneth Simpson. Mr. Simpson, if you are on the meeting, will you please raise your hand? Mr. Chairman, I don't see Mr. Simpson. He may either have not able to come back or make it. So that will end call to the audience unless we want to open, unless you prefer to open up later if he does show up. But for now, it looks like that's all we have.
Okay, Floyd, we'll close it for now, but if the gentleman shows up later, we may reopen. Let's move on to item 1, the 2022 to 2026 tentative 5-year transportation facilities construction program overview. And this is with Christine Ward and Greg Byers.
So good morning, board members. It's nice to be with you here today. I'm just going to give you a brief report out, and then I'll turn it over to Greg. So the tentative program being discussed today is based on revenue projections that we completed in September of 2020. And you'll recall those were the revenue estimates that were completed by the RAP panel, which are, the economists and transportation experts. So that was approximately 9 months ago. Since that time, we've been monitoring revenues closely, and in February, actually 3 months ago, just over 3 months ago, when we noted that revenues had shown some steadiness in running above forecast, we added an additional $80 million in one-time funds to the program. This board approved the use of those funds for the US 93 project, as well as I-17. And the US 93 was a project that had previously been taken out of the program when we faced revenue reductions, and then we added that back in. And then I-17, we had additional costs. So that's what that $80 million was applied to. In August, in this coming August, we will begin our reforecasting process again. But until then, we'll continue to monitor revenues closely and as fiscally prudent, we will adjust the program. So the program before you today is based on those original estimates plus additional dollars that we have added in as we have found it fiscally prudent to do so. With that, I would turn it over to Greg to run through the program unless you have any questions.
Not hearing anything, I'll go ahead and get going. If we can go to the next slide, please. So one of the biggest things that we've done with the 5-year program is we've come up with some different initiatives in this 5-year program that we haven't done in the past. One of the first things we did is because of the changes that we've seen in cost of construction as well as materials, we've seen an escalation that has been more than what we've accounted for in the past. So what we have done is we have taken a look at all of the projects that are in the current program in fiscal year 22 and 23, and taken and looked at what the true cost of those projects is going to be, knowing where they're at in the program itself. So they may be into design, they may be just starting design, but at least we've got an idea which is much better than the scoping that was done when they were put into the program. We can take a look at those costs at the date of construction. So we did that on every single project that we have in the current program for FY22 and 23. We have taken and adjusted those costs or those budget numbers in the program for what you're going to see in the final program. That is different than what we had in the tentative program. And again, the rationale here is making sure that what's in the program has true rationale, it's up to date. We're trying to avoid coming back to the board over and over looking for increases in costs or changes. So this is one means of trying to break through that process or that cycle that we've had in the past. Next slide. One of the other things that we did is we used the P2P process to bring projects into the program. Once projects are in the program, we're having to now look at a different way of prioritizing those projects. So what we've done is again, we had another initiative where we tried to look at how can we prioritize those projects. What we came up with is basically a risk analysis on each of the projects for delivery. Since they're already in the program now, the biggest obstacle in trying to get a project delivered is the delivery process itself and everything that goes with it. So what we did is we actually put together a risk analysis form, and we took and ran it through every single project again that we have in FY22 and 23. The project managers for each of those projects are the ones that scored each of the projects. We then took that risk analysis, which is based on scope, schedule, and budget, and weighted it so that we have a true risk score that we can apply to each project. That gives us a means for prioritization as we go through any changes that may be needed in the program itself. Next slide. So since we did the evaluation for budget costs of each of the projects in 22 and 23, and we prioritize those projects as well, we have to maintain fiscal restraint or constraint each year of the program. So what we've done is, knowing what our budgets are for each year, in some cases we had escalations of costs, in some cases we had reductions in costs. So we had to take and adjust the program to maintain that fiscal constraint. So using the priorities that we came up with using that risk analysis, we took, and if we needed to slide a project back because it had a very high risk of being developed in the year that it was originally programmed in, we did so. If we could advance a project due to low risk, we did so, still holding intact the fiscal constraint for each year. So this is a not a significant change, but it is a fairly big change compared to what we've done in the past between the tentative program and the final program that we're going to be presenting come the next board meeting for approval. So I wanted everybody to understand exactly what we're doing. These are new initiatives. And again, the whole purpose of this is trying to, one, bring each project up to a current budget, and also being able to prioritize those projects so that they're in the program where they need to be for delivery, as well as maintaining the fiscal constraint. Next slide. So as we went through this whole process, what we found was, and this slide looks like it got a little messed up on the formatting. We had 156 projects that we evaluated. 78 have no change. I believe that, yeah, 78 have no change. 48 have an increase or decrease, that being about 50% of the projects. Or I'm sorry, 78 of the projects had no change, which is 50%. 48 have a change in either funding or increase or decrease, which is 31%. We had 16 new projects, which accounts for about 10%. And we had 14 projects that moved years. And so as we go forward here, we're going to go through into detail about what projects moved, what projects changed costs, and so forth. So I'm going to have Brett Anderson go through each one of those as we proceed through this. So next slide, and Brett, if you can go ahead and take over. If you can unmute Brett, please. He has his hand up.
Brett, you are now a panelist. You can mute and unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me now? We good?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, thank you, Greg and the board members. So what you see before you today, again, is just these are changes to the program that have happened since you approved this in February. So what you have here is a handful of projects that changed. The dollar amount increased or decreased. The majority of these projects had a project increase. And so yeah, these are the projects that are changed dollar amounts. If you want me to talk about any one of these, I would gladly do that, pull that information up. But these are, again, as Greg said, adjusted through our new process that we've talked about with project managers updating the costs and getting our information updated where needed. So the one that decreased on this slide is the Prescott Lakes Frontier Village Parkway project. That project, they moved the utilities out to FY23. It looks like some things have shifted on the slide, it looks like. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Red, if you would, please. Again, what you see here is these project changes in costs. The Queen Creek Bridge, that was an increase and moved to 23. And I apologize for this slide. It looks like it's a little bit all over the place. The way that it's presented here was not that way when we submitted it, but it is what it is. So the decrease in the South Fork Santa Maria River project, that's down to 392. I believe that's in FY23. On the statewide truck parking, we programmed some money to get started with some design on that, and they needed 300,000, so it decreased from 7 million down to 6.7 in 23. It was 7 million. I'd have to go look at this and figure the slides out. So go to the next slide, please, Brett.
Brett?
Sure, go ahead.
I have a question. Did you say Queen Creek was moved to 2030?
Sorry, 2023.
Okay, thank you.
It moved, yeah, 2023. It's moved to align with another bridge project in the area so that we could get good prices on bridge building.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So again, these are project increases, the original amounts, and we'll have to figure out what's going on with those slides. Go ahead, next slide there, Rhett.
So Greg and Brett, this is Floyd. Real quick, I want to break in. I don't know what happened formatting-wise, but what I would want the board members to know, we will get this corrected. We'll make sure that the numbers and the years line up, and then we will resend them a copy. And when we post it to the board's website for the public, we will post a corrected version. So will your team be able to do that?
Yeah, yes, Floyd, we will take care of that, make sure that it's correct, and we'll get it updated correctly. So yeah.
Okay, so, thank you.
So on that slide we have there is so what we have on this one is the last two projects down at the bottom of the page. Those, the SR1, hold on one second. Yes, the last two. Wow, those really, go to the next slide, Rhett. Let me see what's on the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a list of new projects into the program. And so that first project there is Colorado River Bridge. It's a joint venture with Caltrans. And ADOT's cost is $5 million in FY22. The next project is the Scadan-Wash to Paloma. That is a project that came in through our P2P process. And that's the design starts in 22. The construction is in FY24. The I-10 truck parking availability, that is a grant program with Texas, New Mexico, and California. And we'll be getting $2.85 million. We'll be getting some money. It's a grant with Caltrans, and we'll get about $1.4 million in grant funds. Yeah.
Brett, this is Floyd. Brett feels that there was a conversion problem. He has taken the file down. He is going to run a correction and pull it back up because, quite frankly, it is so difficult to follow along what you're presenting. What you're saying and what the screen shows are not lining up at all.
Understood.
Just give us a minute and see if Brett can get the alignment fixed up. And then, Brett, when you come back to present it, make sure that you're being pretty descriptive so we can follow along what project you're on, the year, the impact of what it is, because you're going pretty fast and it's difficult to make that connection.
Understood. So we go right back to the beginning.
Thank you, Floyd.
Let's see. It was actually was the director, Chairman Stratton. He was in here and he was giving me a hard time. He was threatening me to get it fixed or to leave. I couldn't take it anymore, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, John, then.
Sorry about this. It won't happen again. Right.
All right. Are we good? I think that looks good on the screen. I had pulled up something that I had on another screen in my office, so I am able to see what you see now, and I will talk to what you see on the screen. So what you see here is the first of the few projects that are, first of the 48 projects that have a funding increase or decrease. If it has a decrease, board members, it shows up in the highlighted point. That's the only thing that changed. Otherwise, it was an increase in the program. That first project The original programmed amount was $437,000, which is the Bowie to New Mexico state line. The pavement press project, it is now $726,000. Just updated costs to reflect the market change and any updates that needed to be done. Again, go back, please. I don't want to go too fast with all of these. Most of these projects had cost increases due to, again, materials being updated, maybe some scope change, and getting things dialed in and getting the estimate updated, as Greg stated, to get those things ready to go to advertise. The Gila River Bridge on SR 79 had an increase of about $6.8 million, and various other projects there. If there's anyone individually in there, I would gladly discuss if anybody needs to talk about those individual projects. Most of these are just...
Mr. Chair, Brett, this is Ted Maxwell. I've got one quick question on one of the projects, and some of it's because I'm the new guy and I just want to learn a little bit here.
Go ahead, Ted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brett, so for example, on the Dunlop Avenue, Deer Valley Road, I mean, it's more than a double from the original amount in the program. Can you just give me a quick explanation of why we'd have that significant of an increase from year to year? I mean, I know there are, obviously the material costs are going up too, but that one jumps off the screen at me.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell, absolutely. This is part of it. So the reason this project jumped up so dramatically is that we had this project in the program, and the design was going, but then we were able to get some pavement life extension projects that came in, and so we decided to make sure that it was woefully under-programmed from the beginning. So this $30 million pulls it in to the right scope and the right limits on the project. So that's why you see a significant increase in that project.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Not a problem.
Hold on. Mr. Maxwell, the short answer is we had a scope change in this project. And so I think, as Brett's trying to explain, we brought in additional work and additional features to that. So that's the short answer.
Okay, thank you, Floyd.
Thank you. That was the director. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Brett.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving, we can go to the next slide if you'd like, Brett. So what you see on this slide here is, again, just some project updates. You'll see a significant change, again, on the US 60, the Queen Creek Bridge. That original program amount was $30 million. By moving it out to 2023 to align with I believe it's the Waterfall Canyon Bridge structure. And then there were some increases in costs. We had to increase that project to $40 million, and that's out in FY23. The two projects that decreased in funding from the original program is the South Fork Santa Maria River to SR 71 south of Wickiup, on US 93. That reduced down. They reduced the scope and changed the amounts that needed. And then again, I was talking about the statewide truck parking. They needed $300,000 in 21 to get started on some things, and we reduced that project in 2022. It was $7 million. It's now 6.7. Moving on to the next slide. There's no questions. Again, all of these things that you see here are project cost increase. And then due to some of the project cost increase and the funding in 22, we had to move these projects. Well, we'll talk about the projects that moved on a couple on the last slides, on some of the last slides there. So these are just all project cost increase. A big one there is built on. Yes.
Brent, this is Floyd. Is there anything specific about a cost increase that sticks out? Combining a project, changing the scope, or these were just all reevaluations of the original cost estimate and then accounting for the increase in cost that we're seeing.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Floyd, yes, those are the reevaluations of everything by the project managers and significant cost increases to projects that happened in the area and materials change and contingency updates, things that needed to be updated for the project.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Dallas.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple of those, one of the things that you will see is as we originally scoped those projects, these are pavement preservation projects, the original scope may have been a mill and replacement of 2 to 3 inches. After we did some additional design, we found that we needed a greater treatment, and that also is why some of those costs have increased. So it isn't that we lengthened the project, we just found that we needed a more substantial reconstruction than we originally estimated.
Dallas, have the prices also been adjusted for the increase in oil and fuel?
Mr. Chair, that is also correct. You know, we've seen our prices go up, as well as labor and other things that are driving our total construction prices up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dallas.
Mr. Chair, this is Board Member Knight.
Go ahead, Gary.
Don't you feel that when you move these programs farther, these projects farther out in the program, they're even more susceptible to the prices going up as we proceed to the next 5-year plan? So these numbers they might be good today, but when you move it out to another year, chances are they're going to go up again. Is that correct?
So if I can answer that, Board Member Knight, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that we did as a double check before we moved these projects back is if it was a pavement pres project, we actually ran that project back through our pavement management system to see whether or not there was how big a risk we were going to run on is the degradation of that project going to be substantial if we move it back a year. So in some of these cases, what we found out is yes, it may be, so therefore we took care of that potential cost in the degradation. But normally, if that was the case, we didn't move that project. So we are taking that into account. Now, there is a cost difference, just an inflation by itself in moving a project back a year. You're absolutely right with that. But if the project was a high risk to start with, by moving it back, we're actually just bettering the program rather than having to move it back mid-year when we find out we can't deliver it. So by doing the risk analysis that we've done, we're actually trying to be preventive in looking at those projects and moving those back.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg.
So that being said, Mr. Chair and members of the board and Greg, so that being said, with this, we can move to the next slide. Again, what you see here is these are just projects that have funding increase and decrease. We'll get to a slide that has the project that actually moved years. And thank you for that question, Mr. Knight. So we will discuss that at a later slide here. What you see here are 2 projects down at the bottom. They did decrease in funding. The original programmed amount was $3 million. It is now down to 2.25. And then the I-17, the SR-169, the TI underpass, it was originally programmed at $4.5 million. It is now $4 million in 23. And I believe it stayed in 23. All these projects stayed in those years that they have programmed amounts. Again, just significant this cost increases and getting the construction updated with the market and the way things are going in today's world.
Chairman Stratton?
Go ahead, Richard.
you know, it's my sense of humor that's kicking in right here, but I'm looking at this north of nothing on US 95, and it went from 21 million to 29 million. That's more than nothing.
Very point taken, Mr. Searle. That's a good one. Let's move on to the next one.
But hold on, Brett. Why did it go up the $8 million? I mean, I do think there was a question in there. Again, for that stretch of road on US 95, it did go up pretty substantially. Is there any specific reason, or is it just reevaluation of the construction cost?
Mr. Chair and Mr. Nye and Floyd, these were just a reevaluation of the construction costs with what's been updated and how things are going in the market today. That's the cost. That's the reason for most of these cost increases.
Are there any other questions at this point?
Chairman Friend, I do just a clarification. Going through these slides where we're showing funding increase and decrease, the projects that had no changes, they're not on any of these slides, are they?
Correct.
All right,
Mr. Searle, Mr. Chair, Mr. Searle, yeah, the 50% of the projects that had no changes, we are not highlighting them. They are as they were in the original program.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Brett, let's go to the next slide. All right. So these are the new projects that are coming into the 2022 to 2026 program. A couple to highlight out, again, the I-8 project. It's a joint agreement with Caltrans where ADOT pays 50%, Caltrans pays 50%, and this is our 50%, that $5 million in 2022. The number 2 project on there, the I-10 Scat and Wash to Palomos, is our P2P. It came in through our P2P project. This year we were able to get 4 P2P projects for the FY24. That's the construction amounts that are there. And we've put the construction amount in 24 and the design goes in 22. Any questions for the P2P projects?
Do you have any questions for Brett?
Mr. Chair, this is Ted Maxwell.
Go ahead, Ted.
Mr. Chair, Brett, I just, again, being the new guy, can you clarify what P2P is?
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell. P2P is our process where we evaluate all the projects, pavement, bridge, expansion, and it's a planning to programming is what that talks about. And I think when we do an update and a briefing for all the new board members, we will go over that extensively, and then we'll have that process coming up. You'll be heavily involved with that process down the road. We'll let you know exactly how that all comes together. So thanks for the question.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Brett. I'll hold some of the questions knowing I'll get thoroughly inundated eventually.
Yes. So, Mr. Chair, board, the next project we have there is the I-10 truck parking availability. Again, this is a joint agreement with Caltrans, New Mexico, and Texas. Coming through Arizona, what we're going to do there is put some fiber optics in to allow trucks to let them know what parking spaces are available in two rest areas in Arizona. And they'll be doing that. The design will be coming in, and then the construction is in 23. I-17 getting some broadband up to Anthem Way, getting that dialed in. Those next 2 projects, I-17 and I-40, they came in from our P2P. And again, I'd just like to reiterate on those planning to programming projects, they've gone through the full pre-scoping. So these numbers have been vetted through our scoping team, and these numbers should be good to go. They've included the inflation numbers for FY24. They've inflated those numbers to hopefully reflect what the cost may be in 2024 if everything holds true. The next project is that SR80 Mule Pass Tunnel Lighting Project. We had some, they're going to do some shoulder and lighting in the Mule Pass Tunnel and to get the lighting updated in there. The SR88, the Tomahawk Road to Buffalo Road, that is an emergency relief slope stabilization project that will be coming in. The design's been in 21, and they're finishing, and the construction will come in 2022 at $1.9 million. And you'll see several minor pavement preservation projects on here. These are preservation type treatments that go on our pavements to help them last a little bit longer. And the design came in 21, and these are the construction amounts for those 5 or 6 projects. Yeah, 5 projects that are coming in. And they come out of, they have a sub-program, and we can talk more, Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell, and those that are new about a sub-program and how those things come about and what those are drawn for. You'll also see here, too, is additional design money for the SR260 Lion Spring section. Last year, I believe we started out and put, maybe it was FY20 that we did $5 million for the Lion Springs design, and they need additional $2 million to finish up the design. And that's going to be shown up in FY22.
Brett, is that because we are changing the alignment a little bit so we don't have to acquire so much property?
So if I can answer that for you, Mr. Chairman, there's several things that are happening on the Lion Springs. One is we're looking at the different alignments. We're looking at potential right-of-way acquisitions as well. But we're also looking at different alternatives to try and reduce the right-of-way and reduce the costs. One of the other big things that has occurred is we're looking at fairly extensive expenditures for environmental. We're finding a lot of cultural issues along those alignments as well. So we're having to dig a little bit deeper into those, which is fairly expensive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And so then moving on, again, you see the SR260, the minor pavement pres project, the $1.6 million. Our the US 60 Vicksburg Road to 272, that's a P2P project. Then those next 3 are minor pavement pres projects. And the last project on this page is the $300,000 to do some designing for the US 191 Cochise Railroad overpass. That's the freight funding that reduced that amount in FY22. That's all I have for the new projects. So these projects are brand new to the program. You did not see these projects in the original tentative program that you approved in February. These are new projects that you will be approving or hope to approve in the June meeting. So these are the changes that have been incorporated since the February meeting. So Rep, go to the next slide and we can talk about the projects that have moved years. So with some of the increase in these project costs, there was some, in order to stay fiscally constrained, we needed to move things around, and these are the effects of that. So the first project, the I-80, that project moved from 23 to 24 at $21 million. And again, all of these projects were evaluated with the risk assessment tool that Greg mentioned, that we talked to our project managers, and they gave us feedback, and these are the projects that can move fiscal years. The I-19 projects, those projects that are highlighted in that turquoise color, those projects were able to move up years. So that I-19 Valencia Road to SR-86, it was able to move from 23 up to 22. it's good for that neck of the woods to getting a project moved up. And then we're always happy to move projects up if we have the ability to do that. The SR 69 Prescott Lakes Parkway project, that had to move to 23. They had some right-of-way issues that they're working on and trying to get that taken care of, and they would not be able to deliver that project in 22. So we felt it was the best interest. The PM felt that it was good to move it to 23. Moving on, again, a lot of these projects just moved years to maintain that fiscal constraint. Bridge is a combination of bridge projects and pavement projects. With that, I think that's all the things that I had, Greg. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Are there any questions?
Chair, this is Dallas. Can I make one more comment?
Absolutely.
If we go back one slide on the new projects, I don't want anyone to think we all of a sudden found a bunch of new money. These were in a sub-program as a lump sum. And one of the things we've really worked to do is be more transparent instead of just having a sub-program with, a pot of money. We wanted to line item those out so the board and the public are very aware of what's being planned. So those projects came out of those sub-programs, being in minor preservation or safety or other sub-programs. So instead of just having a lump sum and then we come to the board later in the year to ask you to fund it, we wanted to line item those out so we're more transparent as we move forward.
Hey, Dallas. So thank you for pointing that out. Given that Mr. Maxwell is somewhat new to the board, I don't know if you just want to briefly describe what a sub-program is versus the overall 5-year program.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Director, in our 5-year program, as you go through there, you will see a large part of it is specific projects, give you a route, location. But in other places, as you go down, we have pots of money for, we call them sub-programs, a preservation sub-program. Our pavement preservation program is over 5 years. We have designated so much money. But in the first 2 years of the program, we want to specifically lay out what projects we're going to do. We don't do that all the way through the program. Mainly because priorities change. Road conditions, where one project we think is going to last 4 years, it needs improvements immediately. One that we thought we were going to have to do something earlier, we can push it back a year. So we give ourselves some flexibility, but we want the board and the public to see what we're doing for at least the next 2 to 3 years in the program, and we take that out of the sub-program, and then actually what we call line item, we put it into a specific line item into the program. And we have that for pavements, bridges, safety projects, and a number of other things that we can go through as needed.
Thank you, Dallas.
Thank you for that explanation.
Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Chairman?
Yes.
I do have a question, Brett. By moving these projects around, how does the funding for this big project this year and maybe the following year impact the funding that are available for those 2 years?
Maybe great.
So that's a great question.
So Brett, if I can answer that, please.
Go ahead, Greg. Yeah.
So as we move these through the program, Mr. Chairman, Board Member Thompson, as you've seen when we present our program, we have designated funding for each year. So what we're doing is in reevaluating the costs of the projects, we're having to slide things back and forth to maintain a balance in each one of those years. So we're not moving or changing the dollar values that's available in each of those years. All we're doing is balancing the projects out and the cost of those projects within the different years. So we're not moving money at all. What we're doing is sliding the projects to maintain the balances. So if we slide some projects back 1 year and advance a couple of projects, it takes and helps balance out each of the different years within the 5-year program.
Chairman, thank you very much. And I don't have, I can't see the list of projects that you have there because of my location. So I'd like to see if I can get the hard copies mailed over to me so I can review them before the next board meeting. I really appreciate that, Chairman.
Absolutely, they'll take care of that, Jess.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Thompson, this is Claire. Our copies will be mailed to you.
Thank you very much.
And Red, if we can go down 2 slides, please. So since we're now at the end of our comment period, I wanted to go through the different comments that we've received during our 5-year program comment period. One of the efforts that we've had several efforts in trying to make sure that the public involvement has occurred. We've had several news releases. We've had social media promotions, our website's available. We've done multiple things in order to make sure that the tentative program, as well as the information that we've presented to the board, has gone out and people have the ability to take and comment on it. So to date, we've received 925 online survey comments, 72 emails, 4 mailed comments, 4 phone comments, and actually it's more than that because we received some just even yesterday, and several verbal comments that were made at the public hearings. So we've received, like I said, a multitude of comments. As a comparison with the number of comments we received this year, even though we're all virtual, we've received right at a little over 1,000 comments. Last year, total, we had 77 comments. So it's a substantial difference in the number of comments that we've received, and obviously our virtual abilities to be able to receive those comments are working. And it seems more people are more willing to provide those comments in a virtual format. So next slide, please. So we've taken categorized several of these comments, and I wanted to go through to make sure that if people see these comments, or at least your knowledge of these comments and what's going on with them. So I'd like to kind of go through these. I won't get into a lot of detail, but at least let you know what's going on, what the comments were, and how they're being addressed. So the themes that we have, and I think I got like 20-some things here, so I'll go through it fairly quickly. Need for highway improvements throughout the state to address travel needs, support continued rapid growth and economic development. One of the things to remember here is major growth areas that we have within the state, and it's occurring across the state, but the major ones are in Maricopa County and Pima counties. Those 2 counties have their MPOs as well as RTAs that take and have their own funding abilities, as well as their own planning and programming within their jurisdiction. So the state, and what you see in the 5-year program is mostly all, or actually the program itself is all Greater Arizona. We do include in the program MAGS program and PAGS program. And so consequently, those 2 MPOs take and do their own planning and programming. ADOT does do the construction and maintenance of the facilities, but they do the planning and programming with oversight from ADOT, and we include those programs within our overall ADOT program. Request to add signals at the I-10 Jackrabbit Trail interchange and safety and traffic. We received 662 comments by itself about this one TI. So ADOT's TSMO is currently looking at a short-term solution for that interchange, but it's going to require additional work and a long-term solution it's a fairly confined TI, so there's some right-of-way acquisition and so forth that's going to have to occur. One of the big things here is there is a tremendous amount of growth that's occurring out in that area. So we're kind of playing a little bit of catch up here on this TI, but we need a true long-term solution here. So our TISMO group is starting to look at that so that we can start addressing those needs and those concerns. Need to widen I-10 between Phoenix and Casa Grande and south of Tucson. So of course we've got the ongoing design concept report on I-10 that runs from the 202 to 387. And we also have included in this program is the I-10 Gila River Bridge, which is part of that corridor. So that's ongoing. We are working on that. Need to further widen I-10 in the West Valley. That's part of Maricopa County. So again, it falls within the MAG region. They are looking at that. Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, board members, I just see up there that ADOT currently has no expansion plans for I-10 west of Maricopa County. And while that is a true statement, it's not that we haven't studied the interstate system in Arizona through our key commerce corridors initiative. And we looked at each of the interstates and what it would take to modernize them up to 2020 standards. And that was about a 5-year effort of meeting with various business communities and stakeholders. Unfortunately, the amount that we would need to bring all of our interstates up to modernization and other key commerce corridors is about $1 billion a year over the next 20 years. And no one was interested in funding that. So I just want to be clear that ADOT has long been looking at what we need to do to modernize the interstate, because there are economic rivers, if you will, to Mexico, to the ports at Long Beach and in San Diego, and then to all the points north and east. So I just don't want you to think we haven't looked at this. It's just economically not feasible at this point. Thank you.
John, I guess I have a comment and then I have a question for you. We're running into the same problem we have is our funding issue. And we're still dealing with funding that we started in 1992, and we're at the same rate price today as we were in 92. And I don't think there's anybody in the world right now that could run their home or a business on what they made in 1992 and keep it to current standards. So something has to break down the line somewhere. And the legislature has been helping us with certain projects through the past 2 or 3 years. But I believe they pulled the $50 million from the I-10 from the Grit Bridge this year. I thought it was going to get funded, and the last thing I heard is it did not. Can you elaborate on that for me?
Yeah, so let me just lay a little groundwork for the board, and then we'll answer your question. So understand that we're actually on I-10 between Phoenix and Casa Grande, looking at 3 distinct issues or projects, if you will. We have the I-10 widening from State Route 387 to Loop 202 that we're working heavily with MAG on, and I believe MAG has put $50 million into that project or intends to. Then you have the second piece, which is the I-10 Gila River Bridge project that Greg was just talking about. And that's funded at $50 million in the 5-year program, and another $33 million that was allocated from some increases we have seen in revenues, and also by some federal COVID money this year that Governor Ducey shipped over for the bridge. And then the third piece we're looking at is SR 347 TI with I-10, and that project's just over $30 million. So, and then you have the 10 widening of the entire facility. And to try and make policymakers aware of what's happening, we formed a partnership with MAG and the Gila River Indian community, and all 3 of our organizations signed on to a letter to our congressional delegation asking for $1 billion out whatever the transportation program is, it's going to come out of Congress. It's being negotiated. And we would look at $1 billion that would cover the widening of I-10 from Phoenix to Casa Grande. And then, of course, at State Route 347 widening, we were asked to look at that all the way from Maricopa, City of Maricopa to I-10. And then I believe some improvements to Highway 87 and 89 on Gila River. So the three government entities have formed together, and we are trying to work with Congress and the legislature as a partnership for these improvements. Now, where we were yesterday was Congressman Stanton paid a visit, and Dallas and I and our FHWA administrator for Arizona, Carla Petty, we went on a field trip and toured the I-10 area and some of these projects at 347 and the bridge. So at this point, the Gila River Bridge, I believe, is funded. There's another $50 million that Senator Scho in the Arizona legislature is trying to negotiate and put in for I-10. We don't have an immediate project this year to spend that money on, but the legislature has made that exempt from the lapsing of appropriations. So if that $50 million stays in the state budget, we will be applying that in the future to the I-10 widening. So Dallas, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add. You were in heavy conversation yesterday with Governor Lewis and Congressman Stanton on the ride.
Thank you, Director. The one thing I would add, Mr. Chair, is if that $50 million comes through, if you remember right, 2 years ago, the legislature made available $10 million for the corridor that we could get design going early. We do have design going from the Gila River Bridge south to 387. There's two designers working on two different projects that can be broken up depending on how much money becomes available. So if we get that $50 million, we're already started on the design and could deliver that in approximately a year from now once we have NEPA completed for the corridor and then we get the additional funds. So we're not starting at ground zero. We're already underway with design. And what we've told our designers is they need to be flexible. And if money becomes available, we tweak that design we scope for the dollars we get, not just saying, well, we have a $100 million project, we can't do it unless we get $100 million. We scope it to the money that comes available. So it may take two projects to get the whole thing done.
And we've been in contact with all of our delegations because, as you know, they were all given some amount of money for potential earmarks. And Congressman Stanton, he sits on the House of Representatives Transportation and Infrastructure. He's promised $5 million in support of federal funds with the project on the 347 interchange. So we're continuing to work with policymakers and especially our partners at MAG and the GRIC to try and keep this thing moving. But again, as Dallas says, there's studies and work that need to be done before we fully engage in the widening. But that doesn't mean there aren't improvements that we can't make in the meantime. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Chairman. If not, you can do that. So.
No, that helps, John. I thank you very much. And Dallas, thank you.
Any other questions, board members? I know this has been a hot topic. Not sure if others have questions, Mr. Chairman, on 10.
Do any other board members have questions or this?
So I guess just in closing, we're trying to make sense of the hash that's coming out of Congress and the news every day on infrastructure. And I think generally everybody's aware the president's proposed a large plan. And the Republican caucus has come back with a much more slimmed down plan. The two big major stopping points are, how much is going to be spent and how do you define infrastructure? So they'll continue to wangle that out. And then, as the state legislature, they're recessed until June 10th. And from what I can tell, there's about 3 different factions over there on the budget. those that support the budget as it is, those that want to pass that budget with amendments to the flat tax for rural communities. And then you've got another group of folks over there who feel the budget is too big and want to remove some of the spending. We don't know what that looks like and if that will target any of the transportation projects that are in the current proposed budget by leadership. So that's kind of a thumbnail of where we are, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead,
this is Jen Daniels. Thank you, I appreciate that. We've obviously received quite a few emails on various projects. I'm sure each board member has been pulled into different rooms and others. And it has occurred to me that perhaps with some of our shuffling of the prioritization and trying to fit different projects in, we haven't communicated in as much as we probably need to with our stakeholders. And as we've, moved and shuffled, and I understand the fiscal constraints that we're under and why we need to do things like that. So I was hoping, and maybe this document already exists, but if there's either been an increase or a decrease, and or if the project has stayed the same, cost has stayed the same, and then if we've reprioritized within our 5-year plan, is there a document that denotes all of those components and why we're doing, sort of the method behind what we're doing here, so that we can share that with stakeholders and help them understand why something may have been moved out of the 5-year plan, why something was changed in from a timing standpoint. Does a document like that exist? And if so, can we get copies of that to share with our stakeholders?
So, Mr. Chairman, Board Member Daniels, what we can do, we don't have a document like that right now, but basically the slides that you've seen, we have a huge spreadsheet that actually goes through each one of these and documents all of that. We can certainly put together something like that and produce that with this information that we have within the slide program that we're presenting today.
I think that would be a helpful document or tool for all of us as board members to use, but also to share with all of the county supervisors, to share with all the planning agencies, to share with mayors and councils and legislators, because I think they get a little off kilter on occasion. Sorry that I interrupted you.
Thank you, Jen. Any other questions? Hearing none, Greg, you want to proceed, please?
Thank you very much. If we can go to the next slide. So other comments that we received, one is within the need for widening of SR 347 between I-10 and Maricopa. The director had just mentioned that. MAG is currently working on a planning document for this section so that we can have actual information on pursuing such a project. Again, that falls within the MAG region. Need to widen US 93 to Kingman and build the US 93 I-40 West Kingman interchange. A portion of that segment is currently in the tentative program. Both the West Kingman TI and the GAP project for US 93 are included in the program. Need to widen US 95 in Yuma. A portion of this segment is currently in the tentative program. In fact, it was listed in the projects that we just showed, where we moved a portion of that project from 26 up to 22. So that's in the current program, or not the current program, but the tentative program to be approved. Need to put the SR 260 widening project on Lion Springs back into the 5-year program. We had spoken about that earlier, about the design costs and the challenges that we're seeing within that. So that's one of the things that we're working on and need additional funding to keep going. Need to advance SR30 corridor between Loop 303 and Loop 202. Again, this is a MAG region consideration. I believe they're looking at this within the Prop 400 extension as that goes forward. Need to advance I-11 corridor. So we're currently trying to finish up the Tier 1 study. That should be completed within fall of this year. There is no funding at this point in time identified for a Tier 2 study along any section of the corridor. But like I said, the Tier 1 is being completed come this fall. Need to advance the north-south corridor. Again, this Tier 1 study will be completed this fall as well. And there's no funding identified at this point in time for a Tier 2 study. I do understand that in the budget proposals, there was some money being projected for that, but improvements focused in Maricopa County. Maricopa County, Greater
Hey, Greg, you cut out there for a minute. The last thing I heard was some money in the budget proposals for Tier 2 on north-south. I think there's $5 million in there, but then I couldn't hear you afterwards.
So I'm sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
So for the north-south corridor, like I said, there's a potential of $5 million that was part of the budget proposal, but until the budget is passed, we will know exactly whether or not there's going to be any funding for that. And then the last item we had is need for equity and programs statewide between rural and urban areas. Improvements focused in Maricopa County. Maricopa County and Greater Arizona are generally funded through separate means. Maricopa County has its own funding sources through their RTA with differing priorities. So again, Maricopa County, or MAG, takes and does their own planning and programming with oversight from ADOT, but their funding sources are separate from those for Greater Arizona.
Greg,
yes.
I can interrupt you right there for a minute. We have several new board members. Could you explain the Casa Grande Accords to them and the distribution of money?
Yes, I can. So the Casa Grande Accords take and distribute the funding for federal funds across the state. So Greater Arizona, which is everything outside of Maricopa County and Pima County, gets 50%. MAG region, which is Maricopa County, gets 37%. And the PAG region, which is Pima County, gets 13% of the funds that come through those federal appropriated funds for highway use. So I hope that's clear.
Thank you, Greg.
So, main themes that we saw in the comments that came through today. I just want to make sure that the board, as well as anyone else, sees that we are looking at and addressing these comments within the tentative program. Thank you. That was all. That's the end of my presentation. If you have any other questions.
Thank you, Greg. Do any of the board members have any questions for Greg or Christine concerning the 5-year plan?
Chairman Stratton, you know, I realize in this, I know I'm not sure quite when to do the timing on an ask like this, because I know as each one of us board members, we probably have projects we'd like to see. In these comments that we received in the tentative program, what wasn't addressed were the comments that we received from Segal and the city of Douglas in the regards of help on a DCR for the second commercial port. And I know Mark Sanders is going to be talking about that in a minute on this agenda. And I don't know if this is the time to talk about it now, but I really would like to see a new project would be the DCR for that second commercial port. We can discuss it later, or we can do it now. It's your call.
I think go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think, we're leading into that discussion, and Mark's going to talk about, the two-port solution we're looking at in Douglas. But realize it takes two to tango here, and actually three, because we've got the federal government, GSA involved, as to whether or not they're going to continue to pledge money for the port on the Douglas side. Of course, we're working with Sonora and the Mexican federal government, as Mark will talk about. But those things, tend to speed up and slow down depending on what's happening federally in Mexico. The part that ADOT is also very concerned and working about is the connector road. And we estimate that project probably more at around 25 to 30 million, because we're going to have to build a TI into the state highway. So there's a number of issues, and we are involved in working with it. As you know, on the Arizona-Mexico Commission, I co-chair the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee with Secretario Martinez from Mexico. So, Mark, if you would, I think we can answer Chairman or Board Member Searle's question as we go through.
I was going to suggest, and agree with you, let's listen to the next discussion, and I think that'd be a more appropriate place to ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to jump ahead of you there, Mr. Chair.
No. Anytime. The board members need to ask the questions, and we'll get answers one place or another. Are there any other questions for Christine or Greg? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 2, the overview of ongoing international board activities for information discussion only. And this is Mark Sanders. Mark.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chairman Stratton, members of the board, Director Halakowski. It's a pleasure to be with all you today to talk about our international programs in our department. We're actually a very small team, directed by the director himself, supervised by Floyd Rorick, and also with a valuable member who is Luis Ramirez, the president of the Ramirez Advisors, who helps us out with a wide array of issues on the border and political help as well. He's on this panel as well to help me out with any questions as needed. Next slide, please, Red. Okay, in order to discuss the port of entries, I think it's very important that we appreciate the importance of the commerce and the flow of goods and services that we receive from Mexico. ADOT partnered with the Mexican Ministry of Communications and Transport and the Sonoran Department of Infrastructure and Urban Development to conduct a one-of-a-kind study that looked at transportation infrastructure along the MX-15 from Mexico City to Nogales and the other ports of entry being Douglas and San Luis. The study includes an economic analysis of areas of opportunity for cluster development, new investments, and job creation. Because of the emphasis on economic impact, we identified key commodities that use the corridor, primary production clusters, and looked at various scenarios for freight flows. Key supply chains are in fresh produce, mining, automotive, aerospace, and electronics manufacturing. Sinaloa and Sonora are the main states that use this corridor. Transportation costs are actually lower when shippers choose to cross through Arizona than going directly to Texas from these states. For an example, a project originating in Culiacan, Sinaloa, destined for U.S. consumers is 9 hours shorter and $930 cheaper going to Nogales rather than the borders in Texas. When Director Halakowski was in Mexico years ago, and he can talk about this later, he noticed that all the focus and emphasis was commerce leaving Mexico and going directly to Texas, bypassing Arizona. The reason for this is because Texas has spent a great amount of money in marketing and studies to provide data to Mexico. At this point, the director instructed us to conduct our own study, analyzing the clusters and the opportunities for Arizona. It has obviously paid off. But I do want to stress that the director always sees the ports of entries as a system. Every port of entry in Arizona has great value for the flow of commerce. Next slide, please. The study also put forward some recommendations for how to improve the competitiveness of the corridor, several of which ADOT has already been in the process of implementing, such as the Border Liaison Unit, which I will cover later, a $134 million investment to modernize State Route 189 Nogales, the final connector road from the Federal Highway 15 in Mexico to our interstates, and the Touchless Border Initiative, which I will always talk about later as well. The Mexican government has also invested $1.8 billion in modernizing its portion of the corridor, resulting in time savings, enhanced road safety, and opening opportunities for investments along this corridor. As a result of several of these initiatives, wait times for commercial trucks crossing the Arizona border are measured in minutes instead of hours. Time is everything on the border, as we all know.
Mark?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank the board at this point. Getting SR 189 finished, which will be happening pretty soon, is a huge accomplishment for Arizona. And the board was a willing partner all the way through. Biggest rural project we've ever done in Arizona. And it really is a game changer. So I just want to give a shout out to the board for sticking with us and supporting that project. You know, hopefully at some point what we're going to see is economic clusters in northwestern Mexico and southeastern Arizona that are going to be transporting goods and services back and forth. We estimate that before a product is finished, it could cross the border up to 4 times. And that's commerce and economy for everybody. So thank you, Mark. Sorry to interrupt.
Mr. Chairman, I would also like to echo his sentiments and also point out that Mexico is very impressed with this project and very eager for it to open.
I was going to save my comment on that until the end, but I think it'd be more appropriate now for the new board members. All of this came about when my first or second year on the board, and it was quite an investment. And we did a lot of looking and studying at it, and I have to agree with both of you. It's been a tremendous project, and it's helped out, and it makes the commerce much better and much quicker. So I appreciate the staff bringing that to the board and having the foresight to do so. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to add that companies are looking to cross their products through Arizona over California, New Mexico, and Texas, which results in our data we gathered through this study that I'm speaking of. The total northbound truckings in Arizona grew 2%. That isn't despite of the pandemic situation we went through last year. The marketing improvements on the corridor is in conjunction with the state's strategic outreach and establishing of new trade offices in Chihuahua and Guanajuato. Next slide, please, Rhett. I just want to point out to the board, please, Mr. Chairman, I have a high-level description of what's going on in the ports of entry, so I do encourage the board members to chime in and ask questions, please, if it's more into the detail and the weeds. ADOT engages with stakeholders in Arizona's border communities to identify our regional transportation needs that facilitate the flow of goods and people to the ports of entry and local communities. The 3 priority projects at this point is San Luis, Rio Colorado 1, the Cancini Nogales, and the Douglas 2 port solution. The San Luis 1 port of entry is very outdated, overburdened, and heavily congested. San Luis 1 is the main pedestrian crossing for seasonal agricultural workers in the Yuma County. The modernization of this project entails tearing down the existing facility to build an expanded state-of-the-art campus for U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. The San Luis 1 port of entry is the highest priority project for CBP due to the inefficient work environment for their officers. Even though San Luis 1 is a non-commercial port, the wait times for pedestrian crossings is unprecedented, negatively impacting sales tax revenues for the city of San Luis. Currently, Congress has allocated $152.4 million in fiscal year 2020 for the spending package, but we need an additional $90 million to complete the project. And as the director mentioned before, we have had this funding. We're looking to get the $90 million. We're having a really complicated time for Mexico to work in conjunction with us to seek funding and allow this project to happen. The diagram you see on the right is the ideal situation for a perfect flow in this port of entry. And I would ask Luis Ramirez, who's been very in touch with the mayor in San Luis Rio Colorado and the federal government down there, to add a little bit of what's happening with the funding on the Mexican side.
Mark, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Good morning, Luis Ramirez. What I wanted to highlight is that the if you look at the pink arrow on the right side of, on the right image, the image on the right side, I should say, that is a new designation for southbound vehicular traffic. Currently, where all those little blue arrows are located, that is northbound traffic. In the center of the image, which you cannot see in this one photograph, there is the southbound traffic, kind of like in that dotted gray arrow line. What we're proposing is the relocation of southbound traffic, what is in an area that is called, designated as Archibald Avenue and Morelos Avenue on the Mexican side. That would greatly impact safety, and greatly impact throughput of vehicular traffic. This would also eliminate the need for pedestrians to cross between lanes of cars to get to the pedestrian southbound lanes. There's a number of advantages associated with this new realignment of southbound vehicular traffic. The challenge that we're having is that on the Mexican side, while the investment is minimal, relatively speaking, we're talking about anywhere between $3 to $5 million. The Mexican federal government has yet to designate the funding necessary, one, for the studies required, and two, for the actual construction. We've been working with the state of Sonora and the municipality of San Luis Rio Colorado, along with the Greater Yuma Port Authority, with the city of San Luis, Yuma County, a number of other stakeholders. We've actually submitted an application for the North American Development Bank for a $150,000 technical assistance grant that would pay for the studies on the Mexican side. We're hoping to get some type of an indication if that grant is going to be awarded by the end of next week. The challenge that we have is that unless the studies are done and Mexico commits the funding, the realignment of southbound traffic becomes very challenging. And CBP, or Customs and Border Protection, and the General Services Administration are saying that unless they see that investment and commitment by the Mexican side, they will not have a choice but to continue to use the current location of southbound traffic, as I said, is by that dotted gray line kind of in the middle of the image. That would really minimize the potential of this $250 million investment by the U.S. government. So we continue to fight. We continue to advocate for the funding that needs to come on the Mexican side. We're actually going to be holding another binational technical meeting focused on Arizona's ports of entry on June 10th, which is 5 days from now, in which we're asking the Mexican federal agencies to address this concern. And you will see we also have concerns in some of the other projects. But this, because we already have $152 million in the bank, this is the #1 priority right now in order to get the Mexican government to commit the necessary funding. Mark, I don't know if there's any additional questions on that.
Not on my end, Mr. Ramirez. I don't know if Mr. Chair, if the board has any questions on this project.
Does any board member have a question?
Mr. Chair, for the board members that don't know Luis, I met him about 13 years ago when I became director, and he's been a long-term consultant for ADOT, not only with Sonora, but with the Mexican federal government and our own Congress. So a lot of these things that we're talking about today that are accomplishments would not have been possible without Luis's guidance and his perseverance through these. So I will say, if you ever want to know what true exhaustion is, travel to Mexico City with Luis, and you'll be meeting dignitaries from 8 in the morning till midnight, and then start all over again. So I just wanted to put his comments into context for the board, that he's a long-time trusted consultant for us on these issues.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Searle, would you like to ask you any more questions about the Douglas Port at this time?
I think we're going to come up to the Douglas Port.
Yes, sir.
To start with San Luis.
Okay, very good.
I think Douglas is on the list here. Just the key thing to remember about this is critical for the economy in Yuma, because we have so many workers trying to cross every day and go home at night. And you have thousands of people literally, waiting in line, whether they're cars, pedestrians, and in cases we've been asked to provide more bicycle parking. So this is critical for the economy. We need to keep working with the Mexican government
Mr. Chair, members of the board, sorry to interrupt. Literally, they start standing in line at 1:30 in the morning to be able to cross the border and go to work the next morning.
Mr. Chair, this is Board Member Knight.
Go ahead, Gary.
I too would like to thank Luis for all the work he's been essential. But this port, we've worked on it we've been working for years to try to get this port expanded and modernized, and finally got a lion's share of the money that it'll take. But this is really a very important project, not just for Yuma County, not just for, but also for the entire state and the nation, because this agricultural workers that have to get across the border to work in our fields and actually do the labor that gets the lettuce and other vegetables to the rest of the nation during the winter months is just you have to see it to believe it. But it's so important that this port be expanded and allow a much shorter wait time for pedestrians and cars to get through and come across instead of having to wait hours to get across just so they can go to work and then do the same thing all over again the next day. So it's very, very, as the director has mentioned, it's critical. It's very important.
I agree with you, Gary. Director Halakowski, if I recall correctly, one of the major obstacles we had with Texas was the wait at our border was so much longer and not as efficient. That was one of the things, the modernization and some of the policies that were instituted and different things changed at that port of entry that helped that. Am I remembering that correctly?
There were issues raised by business folks in the Yuma area that ADOT was being too strict on truck safety. And I think there was probably some confusion there between the roles of ADOT and DPS as to who or what was being more strict. But regardless of that, the perception was out there among the Mexican industrial community that it was quicker to go to Mexicali than it was to stop and then go through the Yuma port or San Luis port of entry. And so we had this issue not only there, but in Nogales. And so we took a detailed study into this and learned a couple of things. And one was that we needed to standardize our inspection criteria across all of our ports of entry, especially the international. But the key to this also was going to the source and making sure those trucks didn't have any safety violations that would stop them in the first place. And that's when our Enforcement Compliance Division established the Border Liaison Unit. And prior to COVID, we were regularly going into Mexico and holding seminars with Mexican trucking companies, individual truckers, and we showed them and put them through a course to understand what Arizona and U.S. safety requirements are to come into the country. Then we established an internet or use of WhatsApp. So if they had safety questions, they could send us a picture of the equipment on the truck, and we would let them know whether it was going to pass before they got there. Long story short, we are now seeing traffic flowing more to our ports and not going to Mexicali because our wait times for inspections and what we're looking for, and because of the communication have significantly decreased. And we've been doing some marketing with companies that had left us and had solely been going through Texas, and they're now saying, okay, we're going to come back and give Arizona another try. So kudos to Mark and the work he's doing there, and to the Border Liaison Unit. We're not going into Mexico and doing training right now, but we're doing virtual training with our Mexican counterparts, and we're going to be expanding. We now have U.S. companies asking ADOT if we can come and provide training to their companies and drivers also.
Thank you, Judge.
Chairman Stratton?
Yes.
The question I would have on the San Luis project is what What's ADOT's ask on this? I mean, what's if we're to modernize this port, what's ADOT's role in this?
Well, Mr. Chairman and Board Member Searle, we really are a convener, if you will. As I said, I sit on the Transportation Committee with the Arizona-Mexico Commission. We're on the Binational Border and Bridges Committee. And of course, we talk to our congressional delegation. So when you look at this, you have to have a partnership between both federal government and the state of Sonora, their government and ours, because we have to, once GSA decides to build the port, make sure that we're providing the appropriate connections to it, or otherwise we're just starting another bottleneck. So we work in conjunction with these folks. And then often, you know, I just got a letter from San Luis yesterday that I forwarded on to Luis and Mark. They're asking our support for a federal grant, I believe, to modernize Cesar Chavez Avenue for traffic that's coming through the port into San Luis, so they're not congesting their downtown to where you can't get to it. So this is a dance basically that has to go on among several government entities, the stakeholders at the ports. And what we've done at ADOT is actually just function largely as a place where you can come and gather and we can start hammering these problems out.
Understood, and I appreciate that role. I was just looking at any infrastructure needs that ADOT would have to come into play at. And what I'm hearing right now is there really isn't anything identified at this time.
I don't know about San Luis, but as I mentioned, for Douglas, if that two-port solution comes in, ADOT will be working with the county to build a connector road to the state highway. It's about a 6-mile road there. So
understood, and that I understand the Douglas issue. I was just trying to get a better handle on the San Luis, but what I'm hearing is that there's not a direct issue with San Luis or a direct ask for San Luis at this time.
Mark or Luis?
Yes.
I don't recall anything.
Chairman Stratton, Board Member Searle, there's an indirect economic impact that we're seeing little by little right now in San Luis, and that is due to the great work that our team is doing on the border. We're seeing a large influx of factories starting to build in San Luis, Colorado, and using our ports of entry instead of going to Calexico. One of the complaints they're having is they're bringing crews to work with them, and their quality of life to cross through this border to be able to go into San Luis has been greatly affected. So in an indirect manner, in a commerce.
Mark, he just wanted to know if there's any direct ask for construction funds, I think.
No, at least I don't think so. We're not doing that. We're just being a facilitator, like the director said.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I would want to clarify that there have been some investments made in the past. There were some improvements made to Main Street, which is the heart of downtown San Luis, and also the Robert A. Vaughn Expressway or State Route 195 was built as a connector road between San Luis 2 and I-8. There was also improvements made between, I think it's Avenue V, and Mr. Knight might correct me, that connects the port of entry to the Robert A. Vaughn Expressway. So the direct connectivity issues between the ports of entry and the federal highway system have been made. That's why we're in a position right now to say that for San Luis, something that's specific to San Luis 1, ADOT has already made those investments in partnership with YMPO, with the city of San Luis, Yuma County, to make those improvements, which are necessary for the project. What I do want to clarify, the director indicated there was a letter in which San Luis is asking for support on a grant to enhance the connectivity between San Luis 1 and San Luis 2 on Cesar Chavez Boulevard. So that is a request by the city of San Luis. And if I recall correctly, Vice Mayor Africa Luna Carrasco, during the last ADOT, the Transportation Board meeting, asked for that to be considered as part of the 5-year plan.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions at this point?
Yes, Director, Chairman, this is Board Member Knight again. Luis is exactly right, and we're also seeing into our port of entry 2, which is our commercial port. We're seeing a larger influx of commercial vehicles. In fact, I sit on the GYPA board, the Greater Yuba Port Authority, and we've got inquiries. Shippers are looking to come into Ensenada instead of Long Beach and truck their goods up and come through San Luis Port of Entry 2 rather than deal with California and the their transportation, the Caltrans or whatever problem they have with the California additional requirements on the vehicles and the long wait at Long Beach to get the ships unloaded. Apparently they don't have that problem in Ensenada, and so we're becoming much more attractive. And actually, San Luis, we don't compete with Douglas or Nogales. We compete with Calexico and Mexicali. We compete with California, and that's a plus for Arizona. The more commerce we can divert through Arizona from that would have come through California, the better it is for us. And our port of entry too is the commercial port is seeing a large increase in vehicles coming through the port at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Mark, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rhett, next slide, please. Okay, the Douglas two-port solution. The existing port of entry in Douglas processes commercial and non-commercial traffic, is outdated, heavily congested, and presents a great safety risk. The two-port solution would entail the construction of a new state-of-the-art commercial port dedicated to the renovation, with the renovation of existing facilities at Castro, which would do the pedestrian side. So they would be separated and allowing these cars to travel freely without the hazard of going through town and alleviating congestion. The two-port solution would deliver improvements to travelers, CPP personnel, and surrounding communities by diverting commercial vehicles, sometimes carrying mining material, from traveling through population centers in Douglas and Agua Prieta, prevent the intermingling of commercial trucks with cars and pedestrians during peak crossing hours, and minimize disruptions to cross-border traffic caused by overweight and oversized vehicles. The estimated cost of the new commercial port of entry is $175 million and $105 million for the modernization of the Raul Castro port of entry for pedestrian and private vehicles. I'll let Mr. Searle ask some questions. I just want to point out a couple things here. There is a connector road that was being discussed from the border of the new commercial proposed port of entry to the state route. In order to do this connector road or to speak about connector road for funding, we need to do a design concept report. It has been valued at about $500,000 to $800,000 and includes an environmental impact study as well. But I would like Luis to briefly describe why we're not having the same problem in Douglas that we're having in San Luis with the Mexican cooperation as far as connecting the two ports. Luis?
Thank you, Mark. In February of 2020, the U.S. Department of State and the federal government of the United States sent a diplomatic note to Mexico confirming two things. One, that the only long-term solution for the current border crossing issues at Douglas was to build two ports. One, modernizing the existing downtown crossing, and then secondly, the new port that would be constructed 5 miles to the west at a location where the city of Douglas is donating 80 acres of land to the federal government that would be used to build this new facility. The second thing that the diplomatic note included was the formal designation of the proposed location at a road called James Ranch Road. Currently, it really is just a designation of a road. The road doesn't really exist. There's a bit of a dirt road to some property, but it does not go all the way to the border. We've been waiting for the Mexican government to respond to this diplomatic note. We've been working very closely with the landowner on the Mexican side, literally on the other side of James Ranch Road across the border. One individual owns all the land. So he's working with the Mexican government on two things. One, to donate the land, approximately 60 to 80 acres as well, for the construction of the inspection facilities, but also the right-of-way, approximately 2 miles from the border down to Highway 2, Mexico Highway 2. That is a federal highway that gives connectivity into all of Mexico. That process is underway. We're actually assisting by providing information to the landowner so the process on the Mexican side can move forward. He's also proposing, he's submitting or about to submit an unsolicited proposal to the Mexican government in which he would do a turnkey situation, design, build, maintain, and operate both the inspection facilities as well as the road, as long as he gets a long-term concession. That's how they handle it in Mexico, and then he would charge a fee for the use of that facility. That we think will really expedite the process on the Mexican side because it's at no cost to the federal government. It would be done by private sector investment with the toll associated with either the road and or the inspection facilities to pay the investors back. So we are hopeful. We've been in constant contact with the landowner and the Mexican federal government. So we're hoping to get some news and a possible response from the Mexican government on the U.S. diplomatic note sometime in the next, I'm going to say probably the next 90 days or so. But in the meantime, the planning continues to move forward on everything associated with the new port of entry. In fact, the city of Douglas has created and convenes, which ADOT is one of the principal participants, a technical team looking at all the infrastructure issues associated with the port of entry. That's not just the road, but that's water, wastewater, data, natural gas. We're really looking at not just the needs of the port of entry, but all the associated commercial industrial development that would come along with the port of entry investment, as Mark indicated, as much as $325 million over the next 3 to 5 years by the U.S. federal government in the Douglas area.
I think there's one other item to add to this conversation is that Cochise County has agreed to acquire the right-of-way on James Ranch Road to also facilitate this project.
I should say that the Cochise County has been a tremendous partner. In fact, they just completed the water and wastewater report that looks at all the water, wastewater infrastructure issues, not just to the port of entry, but for all the land in and around that area. Tremendous contribution by Cochise County in addition to their willingness or the commitment to acquire the right-of-way. I should add that the General Services Administration has conducted the level 1 environmental and due diligence on the land that is to be donated by the city of Douglas in order they're essentially preparing the process for the formal donation by the city of Douglas. So both the city and Cochise County have been tremendous advocates in advancing this project.
Then Chairman Stratton, Director Holakowski, my question is, why don't we have something in our 5-year plan acknowledging this project? And, you know, both the governor supports it, our congressional representation supports it, Cochise County supports it, Douglas supports it. Why don't we have something in our plan to support it as well?
I unmuted. Yes. Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Searle, I would say that what we put into the plan are projects that are funded. And right now it may be premature since we don't know what's going to happen with the Mexican government and whether the port is going to move or not. So from our standpoint, you know, I think as you can tell by the investments ADOT has made into working with Mexico, we look at the ports system and certainly support the project if the ports move. But right now it's prudent for us to do the studies and have products that we can use, but to put money forward for a project that's not ready would not be appropriate at this point.
So,
Mr. Chairman, Director, can I add something?
A design concept report for James Ranch Road then.
Dallas, you were going to comment?
Mr. Chairman, Director, Member Soros, one of the pools of funding that is available to the department that is not in the 5-year program are planning dollars. And there is planning dollars that come to the department. We developed a work plan that we submit to the Federal Highway Administration. We do plan on putting the scoping, the DCR for that port in our next work plan for using planning dollars. So it won't be in the 5-year program, but it is something that our planning division is going to move forward, and that will be something that is in our next work plan sent to FHWA for next year.
All right. Thank you very much. That works for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark?
If there's no more questions, Mr. Chairman, we'll go to the next slide, right? Okay, the modernization of Nogales DeConcini. The DeConcini Port of Entry in downtown Nogales presents a wide array of safety and security risks for both CBP personnel and travelers. Primary lanes are within feet of the international border, restricting the ability for CBP to employ new technologies. The International Outfall Interceptor, which is a cross-border sewer pipeline, and stormwater tunnels run directly underneath the port. So the port is often flooded during the summer monsoon seasons. And in recent years, drug tunnels have been found underneath, which pose a risk to the structural integrity of the port facilities. The DeConcini Port of Entry no longer offers a safe working environment for the officers, the staff, and the facility for the traveling public. According to GSA and CBP, the port is desperate need of repairs, and it has exceeded its useful life. The last major renovation of the port was in the 1990s. So the local and regional stakeholders are urgently requesting that the General Services Administration, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, conduct a feasibility study. The feasibility study will be a first step to kick off the modernization project. The study would identify long-term solutions, offer conceptual design, and provide a cost estimate for this project. The results of the feasibility study can be used by stakeholders to ask Congress to allocate federal funding to carry out this project. I would like to add, we were at a binational meeting with the State Department, Luis and myself. The head of CBP basically told us that this is their highest risk port as far as safety is concerned. And with that, I'll leave it open to questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Luis. I want to both of you for your hard work and commitment to these projects. It goes unnoticed and behind the scenes, but it's well appreciated. Do we have any questions for either of these gentlemen from the board members?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I have one more slide concerning infrastructure.
Okay, go ahead.
Rhett, next slide, please. We spoke about this earlier. It's the State Route 189 infrastructure project. This project is extremely important for both sides of the border. As of right now, the project is about 75% completion. In the new year, the contract will complete the individual flyover ramps and the combination bridge, the bridge which carries traffic over Frank Reed Road. The roundabout construction and roadway widening work should be complete by summer. And that is the major update on this project. It's been a very great success of how far along this project has moved, and has gone very quickly considering all the different challenges we had. And one thing I want to report out that's very important, the community reached out to Luis and myself, and they thanked us and ADOT to keeping their economy alive during this construction and the pandemic. Their restaurants and their hotels were able to keep their employees with work. Our restaurants were open, and it was a great help, and we're proud of that as well.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I add one thing real quick?
Sure.
This is Dallas. One of the things I think we forget about this project, it is funding from multiple areas. We, of course, use some of our formula funds from federal highways. We also received a Tiger grant, $25 million, and we also received general fund dollars. So it wasn't just a project that came out of our 5-year program dollars. We got funding from 2 other locations that helped us make this project possible.
Point well made. If I recall too, Dallas, didn't we use a alternative delivery method to help expedite this project?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we did. We used our P3 method. At one point, we thought there may be an opportunity for some additional revenues through an axle fee. That did not happen, but we did use a design build to deliver this project.
And to that point, the city and the county are sharing in their revenues for the overweight permit fees. Within the border zone, we allow 20,000, or I should say 10,300 pounds more on each truck coming over at a $75 fee. And the city and county are contributing a portion of their fees for this project also. So I just want to, Mr. Chairman, when the board talks about, skin in the game, the board, the federal government, and the local governments have all stepped up to make this project come together.
Very good. Thank you, John. Are there any questions for either of these gentlemen or the staff? Hearing none, I want to thank you, Mark, again for your work, and Luis and the presentation. It's been most enlightening. Thank you,
sir. Thank you.
Are there any final questions or comments from board members or staff at this point?
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Floyd. Just a couple of quick things maybe to wrap up this part. Reminder that the next meeting is June 18th, and we are going to do a board member meeting in Phoenix here at the ADOT admin building, and we will simulcast a virtual WebEx meeting for public and staff or board members who cannot make the trip. We will get information out on hotels, lodging, stuff like that to all the board members. So we'll have that for the June 18th meeting. If you have an agenda item you want to add for that meeting, please let myself or Sherry know by next week, because that's when we'll put the agenda together. And to board member Daniel's comment, I will work with Greg and we'll get the summary document he was going to put together on all the changes, however that document gets developed, and we'll get that sent out to the board members as soon as possible. And then we'll also post that to the board's website so the public will have access to it. So that is a follow-up, and we'll be working on that as we prepare for the June 18th board meeting. And at the June 18th, just a reminder, the June 18th board meeting will be when staff does make their final recommendation for adoption of the 5-year program, so we can complete it by the end of the month and get it submitted to the governor. And then remember, from then on, we do every month, we look at it and we make amendments to the program as necessary, because it is a working live document.
Thank you, Floyd. But I need to ask, do we need to go back and open public comment? Did that individual ever show up that we missed?
I do not see them on the list. We do have 2 call-in folks, so we could ask if they've joined.
So, Mr. Kevin Simpson, if you're one of the public participants, please raise your hand electronically, and then if you're here, we will open the call to the audience. You see anything, Christy?
No, nothing's coming through.
Very good. Is there a motion to adjourn the board meeting?
Mr. Chair, before we adjourn, one comment to Floyd on that report that he's going to come up with Greg. I would prefer it electronically as opposed to a hard copy. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Knight, we'll make it available both ways. Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by board member Knight, a second by board member Searle. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.